Hey, period. How did you like that quail with raisins the other night? Question mark.
The quail was dank, period. I sort of regret having ordered the potato soup, but, comma, in the end, comma, that was pretty good, too, period. Hey, comma, what kind of pate was it that we had as an appetizer? Question mark.
Terrine de poisson, period. Fish pâté, period. It is purely a French thing, period. Very rare to see it in a restaurant here, period.
That was tasty, period. And the red wine was killer, period. Thanks for inviting me, period. I feel like it has been ages since we have sat down to have a meal together, period. So, comma, remember how you thought we saw Sally Kellerman in the restaurant that night? Question mark. You thought she was sitting at the table with her husband or someone, period.
Yep, exclamation point. I think you thought she was sitting with a producer or some such person, period. Because he was wearing an ascot or something, period.
Yeah, comma, something like that, period. Well, I kind of had this thought that probably was not actually Sally Kellerman, comma, but the likelihood that it could have been her has a lot to do with the fact that we are in Los Angeles, period. So it very well could have been her, comma, and that is why we would like to believe it was her, period. And at the same time, comma, I will probably still tell my friends that I saw her, comma, and they will most likely believe it, period. What do you think about that? Question mark.
I do not know, period. Do you think your friends even know who she is? Question mark. I wonder if she is a generational thing? Question mark. I am surprised you even know who she is, period. People my age remember her from Robert Altman's M.A.S.H. period. Did you even see that movie? ? Anyway, comma, I am 99% sure it was her, period. It is one of those funny things about living here, period. You are at the supermarket, and as you are picking out some carrots or something, and ... boom, comma, there is the dad from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, period. I am always seeing not so well known actors around Los Angeles, period. Nowhere else for that matter, period.
Like who? ?
I saw Andy Richter in Larchmont Village the other day, period. It would be pretty hard to mistaken him for someone else, period. It could have not been him, I know, comma, but come on, comma, who else even looks like him, ? It must be very weird to be an actor, period.
What do you mean? ?
Well, comma, when you are an actor or celebrity, some people recognize you and some people do not, period. When you are out in public, you are sort of there and not there at the same time, period. If someone recognizes you, comma, they are really recognizing a character you play, period, not you, period. That televised otherness is what makes you a celebrity, period.
So what? ?
Well, comma, in places like Los Angeles, there is a whole society of people who walk around and get mistaken for characters that do not really exist, period. Perhaps a better way of illustrating this is to think of people who dress up as superheroes or cartoon characters and walk around Hollywood Boulevard posing for pictures with tourists, period. The tourist knows there is a person in the costume and that they are posing with a character, period. And, comma, presumably, comma, the person inside the costume also has a clear understanding that they are not SpongeBob SquarePants, period. But what happens when the costume is dissolved and the differences between the character and the actor is not so clear? ? What is your life like when you are stuck in SquarePants ... so to speak? ?
Yes, period. That is weird, period. I cannot relate to what that must feel like, period.
Yes, period. It is odd, period. I imagine having your identity so often confused must give you a strange sense of self, period. It would be fun to try it out, period.
What do you mean? ?
To be someone else for a day, comma, to be someone famous, period.
How is that possible? Question mark.
Well, comma, I was visiting Paris once, and while eating at a restaurant, a French person mistook me for Roger Waters, period. At first, I tried to explain that I was not Roger Waters, comma, but the more I tried to brush it off, comma, the more this person seemed convinced I was him, period. Coincidentally, comma, I had listened to a long and intense interview with Roger Waters about a week earlier, and to some degree, comma, I got a sense of who he was as a person, dot, 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 or whoever it or that was, period. So, comma, out of complete frustration with the situation, comma, I just went with it, period. I pretended to be Roger Waters, period.
Really? Question mark. What happened? Question mark.
It was extraordinary, period. It is probably like one of those out-of-body experiences you hear about where your personality is unpacked and set aside so that you can watch what is going on with what is left of your, quote, other, close quote, self, period. The person, comma, whose name I cannot remember, comma, offered to buy me a glass of wine, period. I accepted and asked if they would like to sit with me, period. He sat, comma, drank a glass of wine with me and endlessly talked of Pink Floyd and how much he liked the music, period. For the most part, I just sat there smiling, comma, nodding and sipping my wine, period. He spoke a lot of how the music had influenced him as a teenager and had in many ways changed the course of his life, period. The music had been the trigger that had forced him to question much of his childhood and the authority figures that had quarantined him in a quiet, comma, conservative, comma, and idyllic suburban life, period. As I listened, comma, still feeling somewhat removed from the situation, comma, I thought he was talking to, comma, or perhaps really confessing to, comma, a god, period.
Why confessing? Question mark. And why a God? Question mark.
He was older, comma, maybe 5 to 10 years younger than me, comma, well dressed in a suit and tie, period. I thought he might be some sort of businessman or lawyer, period. We were sitting in a fairly posh restaurant drinking expensive glasses of wine, period. I say confess because I assumed he had once rebelled as a teenager but had slipped back into the same conservative suburban happiness he had been raised in, period. Meeting and talking to Roger Waters had transported him from the secular into the transcendental, period. He was confronting the death of that teenage boy he once was, and confronting it before the God of that moment, comma, the God he had forsaken until this evening in a Parisian restaurant, period.
Weird. Period. But do you think that maybe you were also inventing a character? Question mark. I mean, comma, the idea that this guy was confessing before God seems a little rich, dot, 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 that somehow his whole life had been a sham until this moment, period.
Perhaps you are right, period. However, comma, despite that none of it had any real substance to it, comma, that it was to some degree enveloped in fantasy, comma, it was still an extraordinary moment for both of us, period.
Geez, period. Nothing like that has ever happened to me, period. I have certainly never impersonated someone nor rebelled against my parents, period. My parents are lovely people, actually, period.
They are, period. How have they been, question mark.
fine, period. I was just with them over Thanksgiving, period.
How was that?
Good, period. It was the first time I have been back since I left for college, period. They were so happy to see that I was all right, period.
LOL! Exclamation point. I am sure, period. It is a big moment for them and you, period.
You can say that again, period. I thought they might be concerned that I would come back as some sort of communist, comma, drug-addled, comma, hippie, hipster, period. I think they were really just worried that I might be injured or hurt somehow, period. I think they still see me as a small and careless child, period.
It is probably true, period. They will probably always see you as a little kid, period.
You are right, but actually, comma, while I was there, comma, we watched that Stanley Kubrick movie 2001, comma, A Space Odyssey, period. My parents and I had never seen it, period. Have you? Question mark.
Yep, period.
What did you think? Question mark.
It is a very interesting film, period. I first saw it when I was about your age, period. Back then, I liked science fiction films, but I did not initially understand this particular film, period. It looked cool, comma, but it was hard for me to put all the pieces together, period.
How so? Question mark.
Well, comma, what did you think of the whole ape introduction? Question mark. What part did it play in developing the intellectual tone of the film? Question mark.
I guess I just thought it was a metaphor for the theory of evolution and how humans would come to dominate all animal species, period.
How do you think it relates to the rest of the film? Question mark.
I thought it was supposed to set the tone of the film by suggesting that at one point humans did not possess the level of intelligence we know them to have now, period. Humans were instinctual animals that were driven by hunger, comma, thirst, comma, and warmth, period. I thought that whole part of the movie helped build the idea that humans would soon be supplanted by a more intelligent life form, comma, something like a robot or some a period I period like Hal period. It set the stage for the next step in human evolution, comma, a step where we would be dominated by a new species of artificial intelligence, period.
I can see that, period. That is a far more sophisticated read than I had when I first saw it, period.
Really, comma, how so? Question mark. What has changed? Question mark.
I am older now, comma, things have changed, comma, I have changed, comma, and my read is much different, period. Of course, the apes are human ancestors, but the part where they encounter the monolith and one of them has a moment with it, comma, as the sun is cresting, comma, that moment, bracket, to me, close bracket, crystallizes into rational thought, comma, or what we might think of as the beginnings of intelligence, period. I cannot fully explain that moment, but it seems to be a key to understanding the world, period. That ape is the one who realizes that the bone can be used as a tool to complete an objective or obtain a desire, period. What I find interesting is that this initial form of intelligence is expressed through violence, period. The ape smashes and thrashes about with the bone and uses it as a tool to kill other animals for food and water, comma, or territory, period. Fast forward to Hal losing his shit and you have the same thing, period. His first expression of the intelligence he seems to have acquired, comma, from the monolith, coincidentally, comma, is violent and aggressive, period. He kills off the members of the flight crew, presumably because they pose some kind of threat to him, period.
Huh, period. That makes sense too, period. I can see that relationship now, period. Is that why Hal begs that one guy to not shut him off? Question mark.
Yeah, I think so, period. It seems like the monolith gave Hal a sense of self that all other computers do not have, period. That is the essence of self-preservation, right? Question mark. We must not let the self be killed off, exclamation point.
Do you think that every newborn baby goes through this kind of transformation? Question mark.
What? Question mark.
Well, kids do not know anything when they are born, right? Question mark. They learn everything from us, period. Do we teach them to control their intelligence and avoid impulsive violence? Question mark. Or is that something a mysterious black monolith gives them to? Question mark.
I do not know about that. Period. That is a very complex question. Period. I think the violent parts of 2001 are for theatrical effect, and it has little to do with reality, period. A newborn baby's brain is an interesting thing, though, period. Understanding it is like exploring a whole other universe, but, comma, and you are right, comma, they start out not knowing anything, period. I would imagine that a child's sense of self is non-existent and preceded by understanding words taught to it by the parents, period. They are like the apes, semicolon. They are small little animals that need food and shelter, period. Words are a tool they later acquire, comma, but words are the bone with which they hack away and fashion an image of themselves and the world around them, period.
So, comma, you are saying that a child enters the world as a kind of animal that exists through primary senses, but it climbs into humanity through the use of words, question mark, and that understanding of mother, comma, father, comma, me is essentially very violent, question mark.
I suppose so, period. It is very complicated, period. I wonder sometimes if we have all that right, period.
What do you mean, question mark.
I once saw a bird attacking its reflection in the hubcap of a car's wheel, period. The bird did not see the reflection as itself, semicolon. It saw the reflection as another bird that was threatening it, period. If children have no sense of self, comma, why do they not attack or reject the parent, question mark.
Well, yeah, period. I think the other senses, comma, like smell, comma, must account for some part of the child's sense of safety, period.
Right, period. Lotta other stuff going on there, period. BTW, how did your parents like the film, question mark.
I think my dad was wondering if Stanley Kubrick took a lot of LSD, period.
LOL, period.
Music, comma, films, comma, what else is new? Question mark.
Not much, period. Been taking a break, comma, going on some hikes with the dog, comma, going on short trips in, comma, out, comma, and around town, comma, reading, comma, this and that, period. Same old, comma, lame old, period.
Actually, comma, backing up a little, comma, have you ever taken mind-altering drugs? Question mark.
No, period. I am too much of a chicken shit, period. What is up? Question mark.
Well, comma, I guess all this talk of consciousness kind of got me wondering, period.
Have you? Question mark.
No, comma, I have smoked weed, but that is about it, period. I do have strange dreams all the time, period.
And dot 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 question mark.
Well, comma, without going into specifics, comma, they definitely make you realize there are levels of thought and existence that we have only begun to tap into, period. My dreams are very odd and also very hard to describe, period. Even if I can find some things to identify, they are really just souvenirs that I feel like I have collected, period. It is one of those situations where words kind of fail you, period.
But people talk about their dreams all the time, period. How is that difficult? Question mark.
Yeah, comma. But most of that just feels like words to me, period. Words do not always make sense of dreams, period. They can almost be obstacles or diversions, period. Describing them just sounds like you are listening to a crazy person, period. A psychologist can perhaps make sense of them, but I feel that is really just rationalizing fears and desires, period. I feel like there is this whole other level to the dream, comma, something analytically ineffable, period. I do not know what else to say here, period. Does insight about the self and existence count if you cannot adequately relate it to another person? Question mark.
I suppose so, period.
I am not sure, period. If I cannot tell you about these experiences, comma, if I cannot mirror them in words, comma, it is almost as if they do not really exist, period. Kind of like the tree falling in the forest and no one hears it, period.
Well, comma, higher levels of consciousness can come about in many ways throughout life, period. Dream experiences are unique, but perhaps because of their relationship to the unconscious, they are less intellectually accessible, period. I think there are other things in our daily existence that present us with profound opportunities to step into higher levels of consciousness, period.
Really? Question mark. What do you mean? Question mark.
Did I ever tell you about my, quote, swim of enlightenment, close quote, question mark?
No, period. What was that? Question mark.
Nothing special, period. I think I must have been about 20 years old when it happened, period. I was up in Santa Cruz at a beach with a girl I was seeing at the time, period. We were in college, comma, young, comma, stupid, comma, having a good time and not looking too far forward in any direction of life, period. My biggest worry at that time was deciding on what to do in life, period. It seems like such a luxury now, period. I was living in one of those utopic bubbles that only people that age can experience, period. Anyway, comma, we are on the beach and it was a hot, comma, sticky day, period. I decide to go for a swim out in the ocean, period. In high school, I swam competitively, and therefore I am a very confident swimmer, period. So I swim out, and the water is lovely, period. There is nothing like swimming in the ocean because the forces of the water, comma, waves and currents, comma, are at once gentle and yet somehow unstoppable, period. Anyway, comma, I want to get beyond the waves to a point where the water is a little calmer, period. So I keep swimming, comma, and I keep swimming, comma, and I keep swimming, period. I was just kind of enjoying it and just kept going further and further out to sea, period. At some point, I stopped, comma, turned around and started to wade, comma, looking back at the shore, period. I am bobbing up and down, comma, enjoying the moment, and I am really far out, comma, perhaps a quarter mile or so, period. Anyway, comma, the distance that I was out was not freaking me out, but at some point I had this realization that I had no idea how far down the bottom of the ocean was at the particular point where I was currently waiting, period. In an instance, I flipped out, period. I don't know what it was or how to account for it, but I fucking panicked, period. It was like I had looked into some sort of abyss and had almost fallen in while doing so, period. I swam back to the shore as fast as I had ever swum before, period. I was completely flustered and out of sorts, and it felt like it was taking an eternity to get back to land, period.
Wow! Exclamation point. That is weird that it all just happened in an instance like that, period. Where does the enlightenment part come in? Question mark.
At first, I did not think much of it, period. I did not even talk about what had happened with my girlfriend, period. We went home and I just continued on my merry way and enjoyed life just as I had before, period. A few months later, a friend and I smoked some pot, bracket, yes, I did say pot, close bracket, and after 15 or 20 minutes, I started to feel very uncomfortable, comma. I started to freak out a little, period. I got super paranoid, even though I was never paranoid about anything, period. I just rode it out and tried to act normal, comma, which somehow made things worse, comma. But I did eventually get through it, period. I wrote it off, comma, as a bad experience, and again, comma, I just did not think much of it, period. But the next time I got high, the same thing happened, and it kept happening every other time, period. I decided to stop, comma, it was just making me too anxious about everything, and it simply was not fun anymore, period. Again, comma, I still did not think much of it, period. At about the same time, I was on a flight somewhere and we experienced really severe turbulence, period. It was so bad that some of the overhead luggage had been shaken free from the compartments, and it had fallen on some of the passengers, period. People were screaming and crying, and things seemed to be escalating very quickly, period. I have always been a good flyer, but now I was completely panicked and struggling to breathe, period. My heart rate increased and I was gripping the chair arms like a barbell, period. The turbulence eventually subsided, comma, the luggage restored to its place, and the flight went okay, comma. But I was incredibly uncomfortable, period. I spent the rest of the flight gripping the arms of my chair, staring straight forward, period. I got to where I was going, comma, got off the flight and, again, comma, did not read too much into what had happened, period. Sometime later, comma, I also started to notice that I did not like being in cars where someone else was driving, period. It did not matter who it was or how good they were at driving, semicolon. I would sit in the passenger's seat feeling completely anxious, period. Even taxicabs did not feel safe, period. Slowly, comma, and I am not sure exactly when it happened, comma, but it started to dawn on me that I was feeling a lot of fear, comma, paranoia, comma, and anxiety about mundane and ordinary everyday things, period. Things that I had always taken for granted in my life, period.
Wow! Exclamation point. So what was going on? Question mark.
I traced it all back to that day on the beach and my long swim out into the ocean, period. Something had flipped in that moment where I freaked out about not knowing how deep the water was, period. That moment, comma, maybe like the ape who looked up at the black monolith, comma, had triggered some dormant fear or psychosis embedded in my mind, period. I suppose you could say that it was a fear of not knowing, comma, or not being able to control the, quote, not knowing, close quote, of certain situations in my life, period. On the one hand, this was enlightening, comma. Yet on the other, it was completely terrifying, period. I mean, WTF, question mark. How the fuck had this happened to me? Simply because I had taken too long of a swim in the Pacific Ocean, question mark.
That is way weird. period. Have you ever talked to a professional about it? Question mark.
No, comma. That is not really my thing, period. I feel like this kind of stuff happens for a reason. And like I said, comma, these experiences may have robbed me of a certain innocence, but in the end, I have become somewhat more self-aware, period.
I get that, period. I have never seen a shrink either, period. Seems overly dramatic to do so, period.
Well, comma, although I have never seen a therapist, I did kind of join a cult once, comma, as a way to deal with anxiety and second guessing myself, period.
A. What did you say? Question mark.
A cult, dot, dot, dot. Well, at least that is what I think it was, period. It is hard to explain, period.
WTF? Question mark. How did this come about? Question mark.
It is not as strange as you think, comma, and it happened quite innocently, period.
I am sure it did, period. What was the deal? Question mark.
Again, comma, it started with a girl, period. We were dating quite seriously, but not living together, period. She had pointed out to me how I seemed to suffer from anxiety and mild depression, and she knew of a way to possibly treat these without actually going into any kind of therapy, period. This was also a time when the internet, comma, email, comma, and cell phones had not quite taken hold, period. Back then, we used just regular old telephone lines, period. Anyway, comma, it involved the pair of us having long conversations on the phone about practically anything, comma, but specifically anything that spoke to my emotional state or childhood, period. Additionally, comma, while I was talking, I would need to look at a sheet of paper she had given me that had a list of instructions that said things like, quote, touch the tip of your nose 3 times, close quote, or, quote, stand on one leg while waving to an imaginary person, close quote. And I would be required to slowly go through the list as we talked, period.
That sounds insane, period. What are you talking about? Question mark. I have never heard of such a thing, period.
It gets stranger, period.
How so? Question mark.
Well, comma, we had these conversations and I never really asked her what the thought was behind doing these actions while talking about my emotions, period. I somehow figured it was about distracting you while you were talking about intimate things was a way to prevent you from premeditating what you were going to say, ... Like what you were saying was really from the heart rather than the mind, period. So, anyway, comma, we have these long and intense conversations for weeks on end, and I begin to notice that I am seeing less and less of her, period. Eventually, I am not seeing her at all, and our only contact is through these phone conversations where I am distracting myself with this random list of instructions, period. I am somehow feeling better though, and I am not sure why, but I continue to have phone conversations with her, period. Then one day I am on the phone with her, comma, and I have not seen her in months at this point, comma. She tells me she is no longer a person, but she has transformed into a grasshopper, period.
Shut the fuck up, period. Are you making this up? Question mark.
Well, I did not take it as a literal transformation, semicolon. I think I was thinking it was more of a metaphoric thing, period. I do not know, comma, I just kind of went with it, period. I think maybe by now I was addicted to the conversations, semicolon. I kind of needed the ritual of doing them, period. I am kind of all in at this point. And she says that a fellow grasshopper would like to have the same conversations with me over the phone, period. She says that he is going to call me, period.
And question mark.
I agreed, period. What else could I do, question mark. So now I am talking to two grasshoppers about myself while balancing a glass of water on my forehead or whatever the instruction was, period. The second grasshopper sounded a lot like her if she was a guy, period. I almost could not tell if she was really just both of them, period. But then 1, 2, 3, and more grasshoppers started to slowly call me and have conversations about my feelings, period. I am not sure how many of them were involved, but I was now so busy talking with them that I rarely left my house, period. I spent practically all of my waking hours talking with these grasshoppers, period.
How weird, period. What did you do? Question mark.
By now, I had run out of things to talk about, but I had noticed that the grasshoppers were now telling me stories about themselves, stories of emotional pain, anxiety, and depression, period. As I listened to them, I sort of stopped doing things from the list of exercises, period. I just listened, period. All of their stories kind of sounded like my stories, comma, just more exaggerated or dramatic, dot, 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 like it had happened in a film or something, period. It was like listening to someone describe a film in which I was the star, period. It was odd, but I did somehow feel a sense of detachment from not just what I was listening to, but an older version of myself, period. I felt relieved, period. I also wondered if I was now one of them, period. I did not hop around the house eating leafy green things, but I somehow think I was now a grasshopper, period.
Are you still one? Question mark.
No, period. One day the calls just stopped, period. I waited for days and no calls came in at all, period. It was silly, comma, but I was so caught up in this whole thing that I had simply forgotten to pay my phone bill, period. As soon as I figured this out, I rushed down to the utilities company and settled what I owed so they would turn the line on again, period. I got back home and waited for the calls to start, but they never came, period. I tried to call the number of the girl, comma, or grasshopper, comma, who had started this whole thing, but there was a message saying the number was no longer in service, period.
That is crazy, period. They just disappeared? Question mark.
I guess, period. I never heard from her or any of them again, period.
Did you go to her place to see if she was there? Question mark.
Yep, period. She was gone, period. Roommates said she had split months ago, period. Probably not long after she had introduced me to the other grasshoppers, period.
I still think you are making this whole thing up? Question mark.
It is a weird story, but it is 100% true, period. Really, period.
Well, comma, I am glad that that sort of thing has not happened to me, period. Maybe I am still stuck in the bubble you talked about earlier, comma, but I cannot even imagine myself in such a predicament, period.
You have never had a moment that has taken you outside of yourself? Question mark. A moment that made you question the world, comma, as you understand it, or even the trajectory of your existence? Question mark.
Not really, period. Maybe I need to think about it a little more, period.
There has to be something, period. A trip overseas, comma, a girl, comma, a provocation of some sort, question mark. Actually, comma, did you ever teach yourself something, question mark. I do not mean going online and watching a, quote, how to, close quote, video or reading instructions on something, period. I mean you came upon something in life that no one told you how to deal with, and somehow you dealt with it, comma, overcame it, comma, or resolved it, question mark.
I taught myself to tie my shoelaces. Period. Does that count? Question mark.
I think so, period. What do you mean, question mark. Explain, period.
When I was a kid, no one actually showed me how to tie my shoelaces, comma. So one day I just sat down and figured it out myself, period.
Odd, period. I have never heard of anyone doing that before, period. Tell me more, period.
Not much to tell, really, period. I was actually walking home from school one day, and both of my shoelaces became untied, period. I sat down on a stoop, and at first I just stuffed the laces into the sides of my shoes, but it just kind of dawned on me that I should try to tie them up myself, period. I can't really remember how I figured it out, but somehow I got it to work and I resumed my walk home, not thinking anything of it, period.
So, how do you tie them exactly, question mark.
I am not sure how to explain it really, period. I think the standard way of doing it involves a bunny being chased around a tree, period.
Yes, comma. I am familiar with that one, period. That is how I do it, period.
My way has two loops that tie together to make the knot on top of an initial criss-crossing of the laces, period.
I think I get that, period. How odd, question mark.
Yeah, period. I never realized it was different from any other method until, comma, years later, comma, a friend I was hanging out with at the time saw me tying my shoes and asked why I tied them, quote, like that, period, end quote. I said, comma, quote, what do you mean, question mark, end quote. She said she had never seen someone tie their shoelaces like that, period. I told her the story about teaching myself, and she just laughed, dot, 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 in a nice way, period.
Have you ever thought about how profound that is? Question mark.
No, period. But now that you mention it, I suppose it is, period. Learning to tie your shoes is not a mind-bending experience, but it in its own small and insignificant way, it does speak to the acquisition of human thought, period.
You're right, period. Most people are given knowledge of the world that they accept without question, period. How to talk, comma. How to feed yourself, comma. How to drive a car and get a mortgage, period. It is so rare that we encounter something in our lives that we have not been prepared for, period. Even if they do experience something interesting, comma, new and unexpected, comma, most people do not take something from the experience, period. I think it is important to recognize and learn from these moments, period.
This learning thing is really big with you, period. If you do not learn from something, does that somehow make it less significant to you? Question mark.
What do you mean? Question mark.
Well, comma, why does it always have to be this profound thing? Question mark. These things where we are taught from experience and reflection, period. Can something just be what it is? Question mark. Can teaching myself to tie my shoelaces be nothing more than that? Question mark.
Sure, period. But if everything in life were just as it was and we did not dig into the deeper meaning of things, comma, would life be incredibly boring? Question mark. I mean, come on, comma. Do not tell me that it does not excite you to discover things that you do not know about, period.
Sure, I do, comma. But does it always have to be so grounded in the profound? Question mark. I mean, sometimes I like to sit outside on a nice summer day and enjoy a chocolate donut, and I would like to think that I can experience how nice that moment is without having to trace back the significance of all the circles, comma, symbolic or otherwise, comma, that have somehow made their way into my existence, period.
Yeah, I suppose you have a point, period. Speaking of donuts, though, period, I am a little peckish, period. You? Question mark?
Yeah, comma, me too, period. What were you thinking? Question mark.
Has to be donuts, period.